my birthday, my grandfather came to visit me. "Did you like the car I sent you last year?" he asked. I replied, "What car? I hadn't received anything." My grandfather turned to look at my parents, whose faces had turned pale, and chaos broke loose. "My name is Alexander, and for as long as I can remember, I have always been the least favorite child in my family. It's not something you can ignore, even if you try to act strong. My parents, Margarita and Jamie, always had a favorite, my younger brother, Esteban. He was the sun that lit up their lives, while I was like a shadow they barely noticed. I'm not exaggerating when I say that since I was little, everything good was for Esteban. The best toys, the nicest clothes, the words of encouragement, the warm smiles, it was all for him. I, on the other hand, received the leftovers, if there were any. I grew up in a house where comparisons were a daily occurrence. "Look at Esteban. So smart, so charismatic," my mother would say, while I barely received a, "You should try harder too, Alexander." My father was no better. He was always busy praising Esteban for anything, from a mediocre drawing to an average grade in school. I, on the other hand, could get perfect grades or win a school competition, and the only thing I would get was a good. But don't get complacent. It was as if my existence was an inconvenience to them. Despite that, I was never one to give up. When I finished high school, my parents made it clear that there was no money for me to go to college. "We can't afford everything, Alexander. Esteban needs more support. He has a brilliant future," my mother once told me with that cold look she always reserved for me. So, at 18, I started working at a shopping mall. It was a simple job, the kind that requires no experience. I worked in a clothing store, folded shirts, organized shelves, and smiled at customers even when I was exhausted. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough for the basics: food, some clothes, and an occasional outing with my friends. It was my way of holding my head high, of proving to myself that I didn't need my parents' approval to get ahead. Meanwhile, Esteban didn't work, he didn't even try. My parents justified it by saying he was finding his path or that he was too young to worry about those things. At 20 years old, the only thing he did was spend the day at home playing video games or going out with his friends, always with money that he mysteriously never lacked. I, on the other hand, would come home exhausted from work, my hands covered in calluses and my head full of worries, only to hear the derogatory comments from my family. "I don't know how you're still at that mediocre job, Alexander," Esteban would tell me with a mocking smile as he tried on a new jacket my parents had bought him. "You should aim higher, don't you think?" My mother would nod in agreement, and my father wouldn't even look up from his newspaper. It was as if my effort was worthless to them. What kept my family afloat was not my parents' work, because to be honest, they didn't work either. A couple of years ago, they both lost their jobs. My mother said it was because of the economic crisis and my father blamed bad luck. But the truth is, I never saw them make an effort to find something new. The reason we weren't out on the street was my grandfather, Antonio. He lived in another country, and since he retired, he had a generous pension and savings that seemed endless. Every month, he sent money to cover the household bills, the rent, utilities, food, everything. He even paid for Esteban's whims, like his designer clothes or his expensive outings. My parents handled all of it because, according to them, it was easier that way. I never saw a cent of that money, but I never asked for it either. I've always believed that you should earn your own way. My grandfather Antonio was the only person in my life who truly seemed to value me. When I was a child, I spent my summers with him, and those were the best moments of my childhood. He would take me fishing, teach me how to fix things in his workshop, and always tell me, "Alexander, you have something special. Don't let anyone make you feel like less." He was the only one who made me feel like I was worth something. But 3 years ago, he moved to another country, and I hadn't seen him since. We spoke on the phone from time to time, but the distance limited our relationship to those short calls. Still, I knew I was his favorite grandson, even though he never said it in those words. It was something you could feel in his voice, in the way he took an interest in me. The day of my 20th birthday was not much different from the previous ones. My parents had never been ones to celebrate my birthdays with enthusiasm. When I was little, at most they would give me a small cake and sing happy birthday with the same emotion one sings the national anthem in school out of obligation. But that year, something was different. When I got home after a long shift at the mall, I found a cake on the kitchen table. It wasn't anything special, one of those cheap cakes from the supermarket with cheap frosting that fell apart at the touch. My parents and Esteban were there, and they sang happy birthday with a reluctance that was almost laughable. "Happy birthday, Alexander," my mother said, forcing a smile. My father barely grunted something, and Esteban didn't even look at me. He was busy with his phone. There were no gifts, no cards, nothing. Just that sad cake on the table. I found it strange that they had even bothered to buy it, as it wasn't their style. Then my mother said, This is from your grandfather Antonio. He wanted you to have something for your day. I nodded gratefully, though something inside me felt that something was off. Why would my parents, who never cared about me, have organized this? But I didn't dwell on it. I thought maybe my grandfather had specifically asked them to do something for me. That night, I cut the cake and we each had a piece. Nobody said much, and the celebration lasted less than 10 minutes. Then everyone went back to their own thing. Esteban to his room, my father to the couch to watch TV, and my mother to check her phone. I went to my room feeling more alone than ever, but I let it go. It was my life, and I was used to it. What did seem strange was what happened next. In the following weeks, I noticed that my parents and Esteban started to behave differently. Suddenly, they had money. It wasn't just that they paid the bills on time, but they started to indulge in luxuries. My mother bought new clothes from brands she used to say were a waste. My father showed up with an expensive watch, and Esteban was more unbearable than ever, showing off a pair of designer sneakers and talking about a trip they were planning. One day, I overheard my mother on the phone talking about a vacation the three of them were going to take. Just us. A little getaway to relax, she said, as if I didn't exist. And so it was. They went on a week-long trip to a beach resort. They didn't even invite me. There's no room, Alexander, and besides, you have to work, don't you? My father told me with a smile that I couldn't tell if it was cruelty or simple indifference. I stayed home, working my shifts at the mall while they posted pictures on social media, smiling as if they were the perfect family. I'm not going to lie, it hurt, but I also wondered where they were getting so much money. My grandfather always sent enough for the bills, but this was different. Was Antonio giving them more? I decided not to think about it too much. Maybe it was just that, an extra gift from my grandfather. I didn't want to get into trouble. A year passed, and my life remained the same. The same job at the mall, the same salary that was barely enough, the same mockery from my family. Esteban still wasn't working, living like a king thanks to my grandfather's money, while my parents spoiled him as if he were a prince. I, on the other hand, continued to be the target of their comments. Another year and you're still doing the same thing, Alexander, my mother once told me in a tone that dripped with contempt. At your age, you should have a better job. Esteban would laugh, and my father would nod as if he agreed. I just clenched my teeth and carried on. When my 20th birthday arrived, I didn't expect anything special. I thought it would be another day of work, another cheap cake, if they even bothered, and the same bored faces from my family. But then something unexpected happened. I received a call from my grandfather Antonio. His voice sounded warm, as always, but also excited. Alexander, my boy, how are you? I'm coming to visit you for your birthday today. I want to take you to dinner at the best restaurant in the city. Invite your parents and Esteban. This is a family celebration. I couldn't believe it. My grandfather was coming. I hadn't seen him in 3 years, and the idea of having him here filled me with a joy I hadn't felt in a long time. I accepted immediately, and he told me he would arrive in the evening. I was so excited. Finally, someone who truly loved me would be here. My grandfather kept his promise. He appeared at the door of the house with his usual smile and a hug that made me feel like I was that little boy spending summers with him again. He was a tall man with white hair and an energy that didn't seem to belong to someone his age. My parents and Esteban greeted him with forced smiles, as if they were nervous. I noticed my mother was quieter than usual and my father couldn't stop looking at his phone. Esteban, for his part, barely greeted my grandfather and stayed in a corner as if he were annoyed at having to be there. We went to the restaurant Antonio had chosen, one of those elegant places where the waiters treat you like royalty. The food was incredible, and for a moment, I felt special. My grandfather kept asking me how I was, how my job was going, what my plans were. It was the first time in a long time that someone was genuinely interested in me. My parents and Esteban, however, didn't seem to be enjoying themselves as much. They spoke little, and when they did, it was to make sarcastic comments about me. Another year at the mall, Alexander? Esteban said with a chuckle. How immature. You're still the same as always, my mother added. I tried to ignore them. I didn't want their words to ruin the moment. But then, after dinner, while we were having dessert, my grandfather looked at me with a smile and said something that changed everything. Alexander, tell me, did you like the gift I sent you last year? I was confused. The gift from last year? The only thing I had received was that horrible cake, and my parents had said it was from him. Oh, yes. Thanks for the cake, Grandpa. My parents told me it was from you, I replied, trying to sound grateful. But Antonio's face changed. He frowned as if something didn't add up. A cake? He said, confused. I didn't send you a cake, Alexander. The atmosphere at the table tensed immediately. My parents, who had been quiet until then, started shifting uneasily in their chairs. My mother tried to change the subject, saying something about how delicious the food was, but my grandfather wouldn't let her. "One moment, Margarita. What cake?" He looked at me and said, "Alexander, didn't you like the car I sent you for your birthday last year?" I felt as if the world had stopped. "A car? What car?" I looked at my grandfather, completely lost. "What car? I didn't receive any car, Grandpa. Just the cake that my parents said was from you." At that moment, I saw my mother's face turn pale and my father drop his fork on his plate. Esteban, who always had something to say, was silent, staring at the floor. Antonio turned slowly towards my parents, and his expression was a mixture of confusion and fury. "What is going on here?" he asked in a voice that sent shivers down my spine. "I gave you a car for Alexander, a sports car, to be his birthday present. Where is that car?" My parents began to stammer. My mother said something about a possible misunderstanding, and my father tried to blame the shipping company, saying maybe it never arrived, but my grandfather was not stupid. He slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses tremble. "You tell me right now what happened to that car, or there will be consequences," he shouted. The restaurant fell silent. The other diners were looking at us, but I didn't care. I was in shock. A car! My grandfather had sent me a sports car, and I hadn't received it. I looked at my parents, waiting for an explanation, but what came next was worse than I could have imagined. Between mumbles and excuses, my mother finally confessed. "We sold it," she said, almost in a whisper. "We needed the money, Antonio." Things were tough. My father interrupted her, trying to justify himself. "It was for the good of the family. We couldn't afford to maintain such an expensive car, and Esteban needed things." That's when I lost control. "Esteban needed things," I shouted, unable to contain myself. "And what about me? I don't matter. Why is it always him?" My grandfather said nothing for a moment, just looked at them with a fury I had never seen in him. Then he spoke, and his words were like knives. "I can't believe you betrayed my trust. I gave you that car for Alexander, my grandson, the one who has always worked hard, the one who never asks for anything, and you sold it to spend it on clothes, on trips, on things for Esteban. Seriously?" My parents tried to apologize, saying they wouldn't do it again, that it was a mistake. Esteban, for the first time, looked scared. But my grandfather didn't want to hear anymore. "Not one more cent," he said, standing up from the table. "It's over. Pay this bill yourselves." Then he looked at me and said, "Alexander." We left the restaurant, and my grandfather took me to his car. As he drove, he told me the whole truth. For years, he had been sending money for me, not just for the house. He transferred the money to my parents because he trusted them, but now he realized they had kept it all. The sports car wasn't the only thing. He had sent money so I could study, so I could have things that would help me get ahead, but my parents had used it for themselves and for Esteban. "I realized a long time ago how they treated you, Alexander," he said. "The teasing, the way they made you feel less, but this is the last straw." I was in shock, not just because of the car, but because of everything my grandfather had tried to do for me. I felt betrayed, but also relieved. Finally, someone saw the truth. Then, Antonio looked at me and said, "You're not going to stay here with them. Come with me. I live in a country where you will have opportunities. I'll help you start over." I didn't think twice. I accepted. A week later, I was on a plane with my grandfather, heading towards a new life. When I arrived at his house, I was blown away. It was a huge house with a garage full of sports cars. "Pick one," he said, smiling. "The one they stole from you is gone, but these are yours." I chose a bright red car, like something out of a movie. It was more than I had ever dreamed of. With my grandfather's help, I got a job at a major company. It wasn't just any job. It was a well-paying position with opportunities for growth. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was worth something. My grandfather was proud, and so was I. A few months later, my phone started ringing. It was my parents and Esteban. I didn't answer the first call, or the second. For weeks, my phone was filled with messages and calls. I ignored them all because, honestly, I didn't want to hear from them. After what they had done selling the car my grandfather had given me, using the money he sent for me on their own luxuries, mocking me for years, I felt no obligation to answer them. But one night, after a long day at work, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to answer just to see how far their audacity would go. "Alexander, is that you?" My mother said on the other end of the line. Her voice was shaky, almost unrecognizable. It had always had that authoritarian tone, as if I were a nuisance, but now she sounded desperate. "We need to talk to you. Please, don't hang up." I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "Things are difficult. Your grandfather cut us off completely. We have no money, Alexander. We're going to be evicted next week if we don't pay the rent. You're our family. You have to help us." I couldn't help it. I let out a dry laugh. "Family. The word sounded ridiculous coming from her mouth. Family, I said, my tone colder than I expected. So now I'm family. Where was this family when you were making fun of me? When you sold the car my grandfather sent me to spend it on designer clothes and trips for Esteban? Where was this family when you left me alone while you all went on vacation? My mother tried to interrupt me, but I didn't let her. No, Margarita, don't give me that now. For years, you treated me like I didn't exist. And now that you're in trouble, you remember me? There was a silence on the other end. Then I heard my father's voice as he took the phone. Alexander, don't be ungrateful, he said with that tone of superiority he always used. We did what we could for you. Everything we did was for the good of the family. How dare you throw things in our face after everything we gave you? That was too much. Gave me? What did you give me? I shouted. A cheap cake that wasn't even from you? Mockery every time I came home tired from work? Or maybe the constant contempt why you gave everything to Esteban? Don't make me laugh, Jamie. Then I heard Esteban muttering something in the background. My mother got back on the phone, her tone shifting to a softer, almost pleading one. Alexander, please, we're in a desperate situation. Esteban is looking for a job, but it's not easy. We have nothing, and your grandfather won't answer our calls. You have a good job now. We found out you're at a major company. Just a little help, please. We're your family. The word family again. Every time they said it, I felt a mixture of rage and disgust. You know what? I said, restraining the urge to scream. If you need help, ask Esteban. He was the favorite, right? The one who always had everything. Let him get you out of this now. I hung up without waiting for a response. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't just rage. It was a kind of relief, as if I had finally said what I had been holding back for years. Weeks later, my grandfather told me they had been evicted. They were living in a small place, barely surviving. Esteban, who had never worked a day in his life, now had to fend for himself. My parents, who had always believed themselves superior, were in misery. I, on the other hand, was free. I had a good job, an incredible car, and most importantly, I had someone who believed in me. My grandfather Antonio gave me the opportunity my parents never wanted to give me, and for the first time in my life, I felt at peace.